Top Gun flew off an aircraft carrier and onto your NES back in 1987. Top Gun for the NES was developed and published by Konami and is very loosely based off the super popular Tom Cruise action flick of the same name. And unlike our review of Jaws a few weeks ago, Top Gun was a movie property back then that kids were actually way into. I know I was. Well, maybe not so much what was actually going on in the movie, but mostly because it had the most badass military jet ever, the F-14 Tomcat, flying around and blowing stuff up in it. Hell, I still don't know what the actual plot to Top Gun is to this day. I just wanted to see that awesome F-14 blow shit up. Thankfully, Top Gun the video game was poised to give me even more of what I wanted with a full-blown flight sim right on my NES. So did Top Gun the game scratch that itch of wanting to fly around in a crazy military jet on the NES? Or was it headed into a full-blown tailspin? Well, strap yourself into whatever cockpit you can find, because we're about to see if Top Gun on the NES can turn and burn. Start up Top Gun and you're immediately treated to a really great rendition to the main theme of the movie, though that's about all you're gonna get in terms of stuff from the movie that's in the game, so don't go in thinking you're gonna get some weird NES retelling of the movie's plot. Before you can get flying though, the game offers up a selection of 3 different types of missiles for you to use. You get a ton of the smaller missiles, though they have a super short lock-on radius and don't do much damage at all. The largest ones can lock on much further and do a ton of damage, but you only get 10 of them to use, so use them wisely. After you've picked your missiles, it's time to get off the aircraft carrier and shoot down some enemy fighter jets. Top Gun's first mission is more or less just a training mission to get you familiar with the controls and weapons. Being that this game is trying to be a flight sim, you control the action from the cockpit of your plane. Most of what's displayed in your cockpit is self-explanatory, like showing your missile stock, fuel reserves, and some altitude and speed readings. The main thing you'll need to pay attention to, however, is the giant radar screen that's sitting right in the middle of it all. The radar's main job is showing where the enemy jets are coming from around you, and this is a huge part of the game since you'd have no clue how to dodge or shoot incoming enemies if you couldn't see where they were around you. You can also tell what's what, as solid dot represent aircraft, while the hollow dots will be anything on land or sea. Your radar also occasionally pops up with other notifications, like if someone's locked onto you from behind, or showing your movements during refueling. Paying attention to the radar is imperative if you want to get very far in Top Gun at all, sometimes to the point where you're actually looking at the radar more than what's going on outside your jet. Once you get the hang of the radar, it's time to actually start shooting some bogeys down, and this is where Top Gun just can't quite pull it together. Since the game is trying to be a sim, don't expect super fast gameplay. Moving your jet around is generally slow and tedious, as is lining up enemy aircraft in your sights. While this wouldn't be a problem if the game was a true sim, Top Gun seems to only put this realistic gameplay limitation on you, since enemies seem to conform to no laws of physics known to man and can just fly all over the screen with no issue. Because of this, trying to shoot down most enemy jets is an exercise in frustration, as you seem to be flying the aircraft equivalent of a semi-trailer compared to their sports cars. Most of the time, it's just easier to avoid the enemies altogether, rather than take them on directly, and that's just not what you want to be doing in this kind of game. Most of what you'll be shooting at will be enemy aircraft, though a few stages will have you fighting it out with ground targets as well. The ground targets are easy enough to hit, but can sometimes gang up on you in a hurry with missile launchers and machine guns, so it's usually best just to try to steer clear as many of them as possible. 3 of the 4 stages in Top Gun do throw bosses at you at the end of the stage, but they're all nothing more than giant stationary objects that you have to dump missiles into until they explode. Their only real challenge is just dodging all the crap they shoot at you, but it's not too hard to deal with if you know what you're doing. If you can manage to take the boss down and/or make it to the end of the stage, it's time to move on to Top Gun's most infamous gameplay, landing on an aircraft carrier. Yes, as you may already know, thanks to millions of angry YouTube videos, you have to manage to land your jet on an aircraft carrier before you can beat the stage. Whatever relief there may have been in beating the boss is quickly replaced by horrible anxiety as that prepare to land notification comes up on the radar. To successfully land, you'll need to try your best to match the speed and altitude shown on your radar, which sounds easy enough, but it's almost impossible to do in practice. Keeping your plane at the correct altitude isn't really hard at all, but keeping your speed where you need it to be is the true challenge, as it continues to go down and can only be sped back up by pointing the plane up, which then throws off your altitude. It becomes a super stressful game of balancing speed with altitude and praying you have it close enough to where it needs to be when the game finally lets you land. It really is incredibly difficult to regularly accomplish, even to this day. And for us kids trying to do this back in the 80s with no help from internet video tutorials, it was like a goddamn miracle when your plane finally touched down on that aircraft carrier. The game even throws this type of crap at you during mid-stage refuel attempts, though attaching the fuel line is thankfully a bit more simple than landing on the carrier. Still though, whoever at Konami was responsible for thinking that this was okay to put in the game could go straight to hell. At the end of the day, there were very few games on the NES like Top Gun, even if it doesn't quite hit the mark. The hybrid design of trying to be a flight sim in an action game just doesn't work, and since there's only a total of 4 stages to play through, the game's difficulty is off the charts in order to keep you playing as long as possible. Sadly though, the frustrating nature of just about every part of the game, especially the landing sections, won't keep too many people coming back for more. I personally loved playing this game as a kid, though I think it has more to do with the whole flying a virtual F-14 Tomcat than the game actually being any good, and sadly I just can't recommend it to anyone these days. While I commend Konami for trying something really unique on the NES, Top Gun just can't keep itself from bailing out before it even gets off the aircraft carrier.